Okay, good morning, class. Again, today we're going to be dealing with the areas, or to start with speaking to inform and to persuade. And I want to first look at the informative speech, so speaking to inform. And we're going to talk about the informative speech, and I'm going to talk about 5 thoughts related to the purpose of the informative speech. The first one is to help the listener comprehend information previously unknown by them. By this, I'm not saying you have to find some sort of topic that none of us have heard about. That's just not the case. But rather, you're to inform us to stretch our understanding of something. Maybe we've never heard about it, so this will help us get initial understanding about your topic. Or maybe we know much about your topic, but you're going to try to inform us about things about the topic that we probably don't know. Let me give an example of what I'm saying. I've used this example in the past. For instance, I had open heart surgery where I had my aorta valve replaced, and it turned out that that valve was a problem, not a problem, but was not working right for all of my life, but nobody detected it until much later. And so I had to go to the hospital in downtown Vancouver, St. Paul's Hospital, in the morning early. And I was already prepared for this for the surgery, so I went in and got myself into the clothes that you have to wear and laid on a gurney and was taken into a room where I waited, and now it was my turn. And they wheeled me down to an operating room. I went into the operating room for the surgery, and I was there for in the surgery probably a good part of 3 hours from when I first started to by the time it was over, somewhere in that time frame. Then of course I was brought back to where they could observe me till I fully had kind of come to. Then they took me up into the cardiology section of the hospital where I stayed, and I stayed from Tuesday when the operation took place till Saturday later in the afternoon when they allowed me to come home. Now, all of you know something about the heart. First of all, you know you have a heart. You know that the heart's necessary for living. You know that the heart is got several functions. The key one always relates to the issue of blood and getting blood circulation through your body. You know these things. So if I were giving a speech on this operation, I already know you know some things about the heart, but you probably don't know what's involved in regard to the getting ready for the operation, having the operation, and then after the operation, just some realities that you face in the first several days. I could inform you about that, not just from experience, but I've also read about it, etc. I could tell you what the aorta valve looks like. It's not very big, but it has a very important function in the body. I could share all that with you, and it would expand your knowledge. Well, that's the idea. The idea is that you need a topic that expands our knowledge about something. For instance, perhaps you want to talk about your home country or the home city that you are from, but you want to inform us about the city and uniquenesses about the city, which is fine. But you need to make sure you've done some research on that demonstrates that not only have you lived there, but here's information that you've looked up. And what you're trying to do is to inform us about your city so that if we ever want to travel, we would know more about your city and maybe come and give that city a visit. I mean, you could do it on that. Any number of things you could inform us on. You are there in giving the speech to help the listener comprehend information previously unknown by them. And so as I'm listening to your speech, because I'm the one who will be listening to these ones that are coming, are you expanding my knowledge? Are you helping me understand some information I likely don't know about? What's important is to make the information relevant to the listener. If you go back and look at that form, which we'll be looking at, the evaluation form, you need to relate the topic to the listener. So as I'm listening to the speech, are you relating the topic to me? Are you making it relevant for me? Because I'm asking the question in my mind, what's this got to do with me? So don't just start talking about your favorite city in the world where you're from, but how does that relate to me, the listener? Why would I want to listen to this speech? So you need to kind of answer that question. So if you were saying this could relate to you in light of the fact that you may one day choose to visit uh, my home country and come to my home city. And I want to share a few key things that will help you have a great visit in my home country. You just related the topic to me. Ah, in case I ever go there, knowing this could be of some value. You need to expand my knowledge. You need to expand the knowledge of the listener. You need to help the listener uh, really have the knowledge of something expanded. If I'm sharing about my open heart surgery, not so much just the surgery, but about the value, the necessity, the processing, the implications of that surgery, you would know more than you had before. And you may say, well, is that important? Well, it's important just to have your knowledge expanded as human beings. But one day, a doctor may say to you, I've been listening to your heart, and I believe that we have something we have to investigate here. So we're going to send you off, and you're going to have this little test done in the hospital. All you have to do is lie on a bed while they take this little machine and they go around feeling all around where your heart is, and they're really looking at its process of beating and the sounds that it's making, etc. Because they can tell by that. Because literally, when I had the surgery, not the surgery, but when I went to visit this procedure of watching, I did it twice. I was literally able to see the image of my heart and the beating and what they were listening to, and they could hear something important, and that was that your valve, it blood comes to it from the heart, it opens, it's a little tiny thing, it's not very big, and it has a Y shape, and those Y shaped flaps open and the blood goes out into a part of the body, then it shuts and the heart gives it new blood, then it opens. So it's always doing this the whole time. It's opening and shutting. And they call it a heart murmur when something's not quite right. And what it is that when it opens, all the blood's supposed to go up, but sometimes it doesn't close correctly, and some of the blood that's supposed to have gone out stays, and it sounds like a washing machine in a way that it shouldn't sound like. And they can hear that and they can observe then. So, I'm expanding your knowledge of this. And that's the idea, is that you're well informed. To help the listener minimally remember key points of the subject, maybe what you want to do is talk about an important topic, whatever that is to you. Could be on sports, could be on travel, could be on major surgery. I mean, it goes on and on. There's so much in this world on knowledge level. But then you want us to minimally remember at least 2-3 key thoughts about surgery or about your topic, whatever it is, so that we will remember. So when the speech is over and I think about your speech, I may not remember everything, but at least I can remember those 2 or 3 key thoughts that you really wanted me to get and understand. The idea is that you want to inform more than to persuade. This is not a persuasive speech. There's an element of persuasion in an informative speech, but its major thrust is to educate, to inform, to help us be aware of more than before. Where there's a little bit of persuasion is in the conclusion. For instance, there are 4 functions of conclusion, and we're going to go through that again. You got that form. We've gone over this. on regard to conclusions, and that's what you're calling your audience to do. That's the third part of a function. What do you want your audience to do about this? And that's where you bring that in to them. So um, when you say, I really want you to remember, you're persuading us to remember, or I really want you to value this, to remember and value this, or I want you to remember and to value, and I want you to apply this in your personal life. All that has a little persuasive factor because you're calling your audience to do something, not just to sit there and look at you blankly, but to actually do something with the speech material that's brought. So that's really very much what informing the audience is about. That's the informative speech in a nutshell, to help us comprehend information that we didn't know before, to make it relevant, the information relevant to us, to expand our knowledge beyond what we already know, and to minimally remember the key thoughts. And it's really important to remember this is not a persuasive speech, although there's a little bit of persuasion in it. In the persuasive speech, it's not that you don't do informing, but you're really moving towards strongly persuading. So there's the difference between the two types of speeches. So remember, the speech, it needs to be balanced. Uh, for instance, a speaker might share two sides of an issue without interjecting their position. Okay, you might want to talk about the pro of something and the con of something, or you might want to talk about buying a brand new car. And you're not there to persuade us. You're there to inform us. And you're going to talk about three different cars who have uh, uh, a electric system for running the car. And you're going to inform us about the three companies or the two companies. You're going to inform us about the two or three, a car from each company, so the two or three cars. You're going to inform us about the benefits, and you're going to inform us about some concerns about the cars, but you're not going to say, but I want you to buy the second one. That moves you more to persuasive. You're then just trying to inform us about these potential electric cars and potentially buying without sharing your position. That is not what we're after in an informative speech. Persuasive, yes. Informative, no. The speech should be organized and contoured to the audience's existing knowledge structures. So it's important for you to be aware of audience analysis and be able to relate the topic to where the audience is coming from. What is their knowledge about this topic? And then you shape the speech in light of that. So if you're ever asked to come to a place to give a speech, again, go back to audience analysis. We talked about that earlier. Go over that. You have the PowerPoints on that. It's important to do that so that you start with the baseline of where the audience is and then take them further. So like I use as an illustration, if you were talking to the Canadian national ski team for competition in the Olympics, snow skiing, you would want to know that that's who you'll be talking to, because then you want to build on their knowledge already about skiing. You don't want to start by telling them the fundamentals of skiing because they already have that. They know that, but you could take them further in understanding some uniquenesses about skiing that would be very helpful. For instance, let's say your country was hosting the Olympics, the Winter Olympics, and you had some mountains and snow, obviously, and that's where the competition is going to be taking place for skiing. Well, maybe you are asked to come into a country and just say, let me talk about the mountain, the weather conditions, the feel of the snow in that area during the middle of winter. Here's pictures of the slopes. Here are the angles, so that you're informing them of something they haven't been able to be to your country to see that mountain, to see that snow, but you're informing them. That becomes valuable to them. But you're not going to get up and start telling them about how to ski down a hill. They already have that. So again, you need to contour your speech to the existing knowledge of the audience. Now there are strategies that you can help that can help to inform. There are different strategies that can be helped. One is narration. It's a sequence of events or a story. It really is helping tell a story of something. So, for instance, what started World War II? What's the storyline that brought us to a position where World War II started? Here's something you may or may not know. World War II, by many historians, is thought to actually be uh, the First World War continued after a pause, meaning that World War I stopped, there was unrest for some time, and World War II actually just continued what wasn't properly finished in World War I. Some don't agree with that, but you could tell that narration. That's actually a very interesting piece of news. You could tell the narration of um, a tragedy that took place and how and why that tragedy happened. It could be a happy story. It could be a story of a love story of a king who met a young woman that he married and she became the queen. It's a sequence of events or a story. Could be any number of things. There's so many directions you can take this. It can be much more personal than that. You could be telling the story and your narration of how you were in a very serious accident and how medical science helped you not just live, but recover and live a good life after that accident. And you could talk about the series of events. However, again, I remind you, you have to do research. So if you do that sort of thing, you have to do research on what the doctors did and the importance of that in your physical being. A narration. A second strategy you could do to inform is to report. It's sharing from a first-hand account. You were there. You were able to observe. You were a part of it in somehow. Like when I talked about my heart surgery. Well, I was first-hand account. Now, I was the person they operated on, so I wasn't awake when they operated on me, but I remember everything just before the operation when I was in the operating room. I remember finally being put to sleep. I remember being brought back uh, awake again. The nurse kept coming over and touching me. Are you awake yet? Are you coming to? And slowly my consciousness began to come back. I could tell firsthand all that stuff because I was there. But I wouldn't just tell you it. I also would do research about it. For instance, here's something uh, that was a firsthand account related to my heart surgery. I found out that your brain doesn't go to sleep. Now you go to sleep, you're not aware, but your brain records. Your brain is aware that something strange is happening to your body at that point. And some people, after the operation's over, some people deal with depression because there's somehow the body's reminding them something happened to you you had no control over, and it bothers people. For me, I had a strange thing happen, and that was it only happened a few times that I'd be, and there's one room of one building that I was in, and I was working there, and it was a church, and they had this auditorium for worship where people met together, and somebody would do a speaking, and all of a sudden I would feel like the room was closing in on me, just closing in, and I started almost panicking inside. I felt like I had to get out, and what I would do when I realized it was is I'd get up, quietly walk out, go outside, and just breathe the air, and I was okay after that. I would just breathe the air, and I was fine. But at the beginning, it really threw me for a loop, and I was really uncomfortable with this. Then one time, I actually was a person speaking, and I had to speak for about a half an hour, and I was partway through, and all of a sudden the room started to close in on me. I wanted to walk out of the building and go outside and breathe, but of course I couldn't. I was the speaker. And so I had to keep speaking and try to look calm the whole time I was panicking inside. So that was a firsthand account. But I wouldn't just share my firsthand account. I would then tell you some research about the fact that this phenomenon is very real. And I would give you some facts. Now you're not just getting my report, but you're actually getting informed about the significance of the report. To instruct is a third strategy. It's to explain how something is done, to explain how something is done. And the I had a student at Oregon State University who did a speech on making arrowheads. You know, arrowheads go on the end of a arrow, and you can use a bow and arrow. And he had these machineries uh, where he could make these little arrowheads out of stone. Now he couldn't come and make one for us because it would take longer, but he had the sequence of, you know, you have a rock, then this has to happen, and this is what it looks like, and then he had this is smaller, then this is the shaping, and here's the arrowhead. So he had the stages and the results of the stages all sitting there for me to, or all of us to watch and be aware of. So he was able to explain really how it was done. And it was quite fascinating. Somewhere in my filing cabinet, I have an arrowhead that he gave me. It's not very large, but I remember the speech. I remember how he taught us, how he did this, how it was done. You can define, to define a precise meaning. For instance, the other day I didn't watch this on TV, but I saw on TV where the uh, I saw the title of a program, and it was the question was, what is democracy? And now I thought that would be, and I didn't watch it because I was doing other stuff. But clearly, one of the things they would be doing is trying to give a precise meaning of democracy and then its application to today. So you're informing people about what is democracy, or what is theocracy, or what is monarchy, or whatever. So you define this. In the speech, you not only define, but then you explain what you have defined. So people can say, I know what democracy is in light of that speech. You can analyze to show major divisions and parts of a topic. You know, we often see a whole. In fact, let me give a perfect example of what we're talking about. This course, I've been analyzing. I've been talking about the science of public speaking, and the last thing we're going to do is we're going to be looking at, you know, this form here. I had that sent to you yesterday, and I got it on PowerPoint, and I'm literally just going to walk through and let you know what I'll be doing with your speech next week. And you can see in this this sort of thing the major divisions and parts of the topic. I've taken all the parts. This is the introduction. Down here is the conclusion. Here's the body of the speech. Here's the ethos. Remember, we talked about that. The paralanguage issues and the bodily aspects. And then down below here's another spot for my evaluation of your research itself. So that really is the divisions of a public speech. And what I'm doing is I'm listening to your speech, and I'm going to be analyzing your speech, how well you did. I'm just going to open a window here. It's just a little warm. Parts of, okay, so to analyze the parts of a speech. Well, any number of things can be analyzed and be looked at. To describe is another strategy that can be used. To describe. It is to explain how something appears. For instance, I had a student do a speech on the black hole. and the black hole is in the big universe, the space where seemingly nothing exists. And I just read how it is thought that there were two black holes that joined together, became massive in space. And I had a student give a speech regarding the black hole. I had more understanding about the black hole, heard about it, not really studied it per se, but at least it gave me a little bit more understanding for what was described. Uh, to you can describe any number of things. Uh, you could describe the processing of um, the steps towards a marriage relationship and how it evolves. Okay, that would be a description. But again, you have to support your material with research. To compare is another one. Compare is to explain the differences between two or more things, persons, or places and determine which is superior. Now, I don't really have trouble with that definition because I actually wrote it, obviously. I do have trouble with the idea of comparing people. But then there is a time to compare people in an election, if you have an election in your home country, to understand this person and then that person, and you have to decide who you'd vote for. And in the United States, on Tuesday of next week, there's a national election taking place. And so there's a need to understand. And therefore, you are trying to explain the differences between two or more things, differences between two types of cars, two types of clothing, two types of perfumes, on and on and on you could go. And then you determine which is superior. Now, in that process, you're almost more of a persuasive speech when you do that, but you can compare. And there's a place for comparing. I do have trouble with comparing people, unless it's like in an election, two different leaders. But I really have trouble with that when it comes to intimate relationships. Um, and this second, number 8 here helps me explain what I'm going to say. The issue of contrasting is to examine the uniquenesses of two or more things, persons, and places, and appreciate them for what they are. So, for instance, I used to do parenting seminars. I used to have responsibility for the area of marriage and parenting at a large church here in Abbotsford. It has several campuses now, about 5 or 6 campuses. It has thousands of people that attend. When I was there, it was about 4 or 5, 6,000 people. And I would do seminars on marriage with my wife, and then I would do seminars on parenting. And one of the things I taught in parenting is it's important to contrast your children, not compare them. When you compare a child, when you compare your children, somebody is superior to the other. And that's dangerous because it takes away the one who loses a sense of being valued. But rather, it's good to contrast them when it comes to your children, to appreciate their uniquenesses and to celebrate their uniquenesses. For instance, I have 2 daughters. Tanya, my oldest daughter, where I am right now, this used to be her bedroom. It's been our office for a long time. It used to be her bedroom. Behind me is a wall, and on the other side of that wall was Melissa's bedroom. And so my 2 daughters used to live here. Now, of course, they're married. They're married to brothers. And uh, one of the things I did my very best at trying to do was never compare them, but contrast them. In other words, to appreciate the uniquenesses of both. And they're both similar as sisters, but they're very different. And one year I was on tour with a group representing the college I taught at for 3 weeks. And Joanne and I were on the phone a week and a half. I'd been away, and she said to me, Tanya and Melissa are missing you. You should write them a note and just say hi. So I got 2 postcards. And I wrote this to Tanya. I said, to Tanya, my favorite dark-haired brunette, blue-eyed, right-handed daughter. And then I wrote some stuff to her. To Melissa, I wrote, to my favorite blonde, green-eyed, left-handed daughter. So they're very different that way. And I, then wrote a few things of what I was doing on tour. About probably good part of 10 years later, they're still living with us because they're in high school at the time. I was cleaning, because I do help clean the house. I was cleaning these 2 bedrooms and came upon in both rooms, each girl still had that postcard. They hadn't thrown it away. And so that really meant something to them because I was contrasting them and I was appreciating their uniqueness. And so you may want to do a comparative, like if you're comparing cars, you may want to do that more. But if you're contrasting people that you care about, that's probably wiser to use the word contrast versus compare. So you know what, if you're just saying, I'm going to compare my parents, there may be a reason for that. But if you contrast them, then you're saying, hey, I really want to appreciate my parents' uniqueness, each of them, and to celebrate who they are. So one needs to be careful on that one. But you can compare. That could be a strategy for informing, or you can contrast. Okay, there we are. To demonstrate is the last of the strategies that I wanted to talk about. It's to exhibit the operation of something that brings about a product. It's to actually go about doing something in front of people so they can actually see how it works. I had a gal come in to do a speech at Oregon State University, and she wanted to show us, to demonstrate how you can make cookies that you do not have to bake, which was quite unique. And so she didn't do it in front of us because it would have taken too long. She only had 7 or 8 minutes to speak, but she had the stages in front of us. From, here's the tools, here's the dough that is made, here's the cutter, and she had the stages, and she explained each stage. So it wasn't a full demonstration in that sense that it wasn't already done, but it was a demonstration that helped me understand what was in process of making those cookies. And then she had a cookie for each one of us to eat to see that they were quite tasty, and they were. So a great job. So again, there are different things that you can do in regard to narration, reporting, instructing, defining, analyzing, describing, comparing, contrasting, and demonstrating. These are all good strategies to be used. So think through how you're going to strategically share your speech. Okay, so that is really the informative speech. Again, your speech is to be it's a 7-minute speech, which means 6.5 to 7.5 minutes in length. So keep it to that length and do the processing. We're going to look at that evaluation form just a little bit later in regard to doing the speech, okay? The persuasive speech. This speech is the one that you have to have ready for me on the, let's see, what was that date here? I have it down. It's due on the 28th of November. So 1 week today, the 7th, informative. 3 weeks later, the 28th, the persuasive speech is due. And that really kind of brings you towards the end of the semester. So let's look at this particular speech. The persuasive speech. The persuasive speech has 4 objectives of a persuasive speech. You do not necessarily have to do all 4, but all 4 are of great value to be aware of, okay? And it might be that you will only be doing one of these. So the first one is to create a new attitude with the listener. To create a new attitude. Maybe there is not an attitude of the listener at all. They do not have an attitude. They're not for, they're not against. They actually don't think about your topic particularly. I'll give you an example. Maybe like in the United States, I told you there's an election taking place on Tuesday. Well, every year there are people that come of age where they're allowed to vote. There's an age. Usually it's 18, 19 years old where they are first allowed to vote as a citizen of that country. But often many young adults aren't even thinking about voting. Now, some may be aware that an election's happening, but they're not necessarily really thinking about voting. Sometimes ideologically, they're young and they think they just don't agree with politics or whatever. But later in life, they begin to realize that my vote really counts towards making decisions. But right now, many are not thinking about that. But you want to develop an attitude, a new attitude from I don't even think about it to now I am thinking about it. And my new attitude is I'm a citizen of this country. This is my privilege, and I am going to vote. Okay, but really it's just creating a new attitude within the listener to think voting is important. From before, I don't even think about voting or voting is not important to suddenly realizing, no, voting actually is important. That's a new attitude. So it might be a new attitude regarding coming to your country to visit your city. You know, I don't know anything about where you're from. I don't know your city. Like you would obviously know. You probably very proud of your city and should be. And so you want to create a new attitude in me as I'm listening to the speech where I say to Joanne, come here, I want you to watch this speech. Now, this student really makes this city, our location, very appealing to go visit. We've thought about going to a country like this. Listen to her speech or his speech. Well, you've created a new attitude within me about maybe coming to visit your country. Again, you have to do research that shows you know your material well, and that will help me know your material well. A second objective of a persuasive speech is to change an existing attitude of an audience into a different direction. So maybe I'm thinking we should go uh, out to visit your home country. That's an attitude I have. But I'm thinking that we're going to go over visit a country, a city over here, and you're saying, let me shape your new attitude towards visiting my city, which is over here. And so you create a new attitude, maybe from on the election, from saying, I'm really not interested in. I know about voting. I'm not really interested in voting. To you know what? No, I need to be serious about voting and vote. Well, that's changing an attitude of an audience into a different direction. Maybe one day you work in a company and they have certain policies, but you are bringing in an argument, a position that another way of looking at how to take care of personnel makes more sense. And so you are persuading us as the executives to move in this direction. And so that's what you are working on as you're uh, giving your speech. You're trying to change the existing attitude to a new direction from who worries about the janitors to, you know what, the janitors have an important job. We need to highlight them. That's a different attitude. To change an existing attitude, intensity of an audience. So not only to create a new attitude or to change the direction of an attitude, but to change the existing attitude intensity from not knowing about voting to, you know what, yes, I now know about voting, should do it, to, I don't know, to, yes, I'm going to vote, to, I absolutely must vote, and I'm going to encourage other people to vote. The intensity grows to that issue. A fourth objective of a persuasive speech is to obtain a behavioral response beyond the speech within the members of the audience. In a persuasive speech, you do want people to do something about your speech. And certainly you call that in the speech, but you definitely call it in the conclusion of the speech when we are looking at the issue of the response that you desire. which is one of the functions of the conclusion. So you're obtaining a behavioral response beyond the speech. For instance, let me just kind of give you a dynamic that's happening in the United States about this election. Maybe that you don't particularly care about the United States or about electing, but I'm using that just because I've been following what's taking place. There is real interest in this election in the United States. There are people who have new attitudes about needing to vote. They didn't vote before. They could have. They just, nah, I'm not going to. Now it became moving from not caring to caring, changing the attitude direction. Then it became intense. I am going to vote. And then it became so intense that people actually have voted. And here's the phenomenon. You can't, the actual day of voting is on November 3, but in fact, you can vote beforehand. There are rules about that, but you're allowed to vote beforehand. Now, here's how strong this has become. 4 years ago, when they had the national election, about 130 million, give or take, people voted in the United States. About 60% of those who could vote voted. Or maybe, yeah, about 60%, give or take. A lot of people just didn't vote. Well, this year there's a high intensity about voting. And people have been saying, vote, vote, vote. So the behavioral response has been strong. Now, because you can vote beforehand, many people have done it, partly because of COVID-19 and partly because they wanted to make sure their vote counted. So they did it to make sure their vote was in. This is now in regard to people who voted ahead of time, and they still can vote ahead of time right up to Monday, because Tuesday is the actual election day. They now have had over 90 million Americans already vote. Nowhere near that before. They're breaking all sorts of records. And in fact, I was saying to Joanne, I suspect they're going to break 100 million people who will vote before Tuesday. Now, that's unheard of. A lot of people have already voted. 90 plus million, and if they only had the 130 million, and they're expecting it to be up to about 150 million plus, to 160 million, they're saying likelihood that if it's 150 million, that more than 2/3 of the people will have already voted before election day itself. So the behavioral response that leaders have been looking for is happening. People are voting ahead of time to make sure, in case COVID-19 gets worse, and it's very bad in the United States, that what they can do is make sure they've got the votes in beforehand. So people have been doing a good job persuading people to vote now. Now, there are barriers that a speaker must overcome with the audience when giving a persuasive speech. It's not the same as an informative speech. You can be a little bit more benign as you listen on an informative speech, but when it's a persuasive speech, I'm actually calling you to change your attitude, to create an attitude, to change the attitude direction, to change the intensity of the attitude, and or to bring about a behavioral response that's very strong. Okay, but you have to overcome some issues with your audience. One is the audience can have selective perception. All audiences listening to you have a perception of you. Remember, I talked about perception, the attitude of the audience, and they can have a perception. They can be very selective. And there are people in the election in the United States who are very selective. They already want a certain philosophy in place. And so they're selective already of who they will listen to and who they have no intention of listening to. So if you get up front of an audience and you're speaking on a topic they don't like, they may have to sit there and pretend to listen to you, but they're not listening to you because they're thinking about something else because they don't want to hear what you have to say. Selective recall. People can choose what they want to remember. We all have memory, and there are things that we love to remember. And so, you know what's important? If you're trying to move your audience to a new thought, you may need to connect with their past experiences in a positive way to take them to another level of rethinking their conclusions. And that is hard to do, but it can happen and does happen because people have selective recall. I like recalling certain things. I don't like recalling other things. Selective exposure is another challenge you have. People, knowing what you're going to speak about, may not come because they don't want to be exposed, or they don't agree with you, and they don't want to be there. They don't want to hear what you have to say. So they choose to not listen at all. The degree of commitment is another reality that you must overcome. People have commitments to certain things. I'm committed to a certain approach about government. And how strong is that? You are up against that. And you may want to bring something that I'm not comfortable with. Somehow you have to help me be willing to at least listen to you, because my degree commitment can be so strong that either I don't show up, exposure, I don't want to recall, or I am very selective of what I actually want to listen to. Public commitment. Public commitment. What this means is that you, as a listener, and your audience all are listening, they already, to a lot of people, have already made a public commitment towards something. And to listen to your speech and be persuaded to change, in some eyes, could be losing honor or respect. And so that's a hard thing. So when you're up trying to persuade people to make a commitment towards buying a certain make of a car, where for years they've driven another make of car and they think it's the greatest type of car to own, that's hard to persuade them. People are proud, and sometimes they hold on to what they think of the past, even though when you are sharing, they go like, but you actually, what you're describing makes more sense. Can you persuade them to actually make a decision when they already have made a public commitment? People are aware of that. Differences between attitudes of the sender and receiver. The fact is that um, there are differences between the attitudes of you, the sender, and the receiver. Your attitudes might be going left makes sense, and their attitude might be going right makes sense. And if the difference is so big, they don't want to listen to you at all. And that's where audience analysis becomes really important. Group pressure, group pressure, peer pressure is very powerful, and it persuades people towards something. In a room full of people, there's usually some people there who are kind of seen as kind of the leaders. And people often watch what they say or how they react and do, and then they may not like what another person's thinking, but they may feel that other person's more powerful, and the whole group is focusing on doing what that person is suggesting, and so everybody goes with what they're saying. And that can be a problem for you if you're in a room full of people and they're persuaded a certain way, and there's a group, there's some key people that are wanting to move in a certain direction that's opposite of yours. Everybody wants to follow them. It's hard to persuade them to think something differently. It's a challenge at best. You see, doing a persuasive speech is not easy because you're dealing with human beings who have their own perspectives of things, and it becomes problematic. When I was working at a church as a youth pastor part-time, I was working on my master's degree. I started working with the teenagers, and I met with both the junior high and the senior high teenagers at the same time. It was a good sized group of people, of kids, and their leaders were there too. And I'm just sharing about myself. But what became very apparent that there was a guy and his girlfriend were very influential, and other teenagers kind of tended to watch what they thought to make a decision. And I was cognizant of the group pressure. And this guy said to me, he said, I can make you or I can break you in the ministry you have here. That was almost a challenge to my authority. And I had to gulp a little bit because I realized he was influential. And what he might say might be how I'm seen and perceived. And so I had to be a little bit careful how I handled that at all. What changed his attitude about me, and not that he had a bad attitude about me, but what brought him over to be supportive of me was not that moment, that night, but rather he was driving his father's car, and it was a nice car, and it was pretty powerful. And I had a 1969 Mustang, army green, had a scoop, had a powerful motor in it. And I bought the car when we moved to California to go to school there. I only paid, I think it was something like $1,400 for it. And when I sold it for about $3,000 years later, and now I wish I'd never sold it because it's worth over $10,000. It was a beautiful car. And anyways, I was at a street corner, a set of lights, and he with his girlfriend was in his dad's car driving. He came up beside me and had the car in neutral and he was revving the engine. And I thought, okay, you want to have a drag. You want to see who can go faster? I broke the law. I agree with that. And the light changed and I absolutely booted my car. I mean, I had my back tires uh, smoking rubber for a split second. And I took off and I left him behind. I tore into him like I won the race. And the next time we all got together with the teenagers, he was very supportive of me because I had a hot car and he knew it. And after that, I didn't have so much trouble. Well, I guess you might say car dragging was my persuasive speech to him. It did work. But group pressures, more importantly, the point is it impacts your audience. So be aware of that. People are more likely to change their behavior if the suggested changes have the following 5 kind of characteristics. So you're trying to persuade, you're not just giving a speech to give a speech. See, when you give your persuasive speech, I'm paying attention to, is this really a persuasive speech? I'm paying attention to what it does to me listening. And you get evaluated by me that way. Now, I'm not expecting you to be the world best persuasive speaker. You're taking this course to learn about this. But clearly, an attempt at this has to be done. First of all, is consistent. People are more likely to change their behavior if the suggested change is consistent with their present beliefs, attitudes, and values. That doesn't mean you have to take on all the values and attitudes and philosophy of the people you're speaking to. When I spoke to that very difficult audience I mentioned to you, it was early childhood education day, and I was the keynote speaker, and then there were a bunch of workshops for the people to go to. The room was packed when I was speaking. Some people refused to come because they knew where I stood regarding philosophical positions about life. And I knew that, but the room was packed and I was looking forward to, but I was nervous about this speech because it was determined that about 2/3 to 3/4 of the audience didn't hold my values or my position. And I got that. And so when I gave the speech, going back to the first thing in understanding the introduction to the speech, I had to do a couple things. First of all, I had to gain their attention. I had to get them wanting to listen to more. Then I needed to relate the topic to them. And then it had to relate the topic to me. And I had that strategy. And when it came to relating the topic to me, I was able to demonstrate that I teach courses, have taught educational courses on early childhood education, on childhood education. And I said, I'm a parent. My children are now teenagers, but they were little children to start with. And I talked about the power and the value of early childhood education teachers and the importance of them being significant. And I was sharing the same beliefs and the same attitudes and values at that level. There are other attitudes and values I had that were different, but I laid those aside for the moment to gain their attention with the story I told, to relate the topic to them, to say how valuable they are, to tell them that I teach this is valuable to me. And I dropped their defenses. Once I was able to do that, then I was able to move towards a thought for them to seriously consider. I'd taken away their differences with me. People are more likely to change their behavior if the suggested change will require small rather than large changes in their lives. Let's say you're talking to a whole audience full of people who smoke cigarettes. Let's say all those people smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day. And let's say your ultimate objective, you want people to quit smoking because it is harmful to the body, it's harmful to the lungs. My oldest brother died because he refused to quit smoking till the latter part of his life when it was too late. The doctors literally did an operation on him where they went in and they stapled his lungs. So he only had about 20 to 21% capacity for air in his lungs. Okay, so I'm very sensitive to this issue. So you're in a room full of people who smoke 2 or 3 packs a day. If you go in and say you need to all stop smoking right now, that's not happening. You might even have great facts, but everybody's not going to stop smoking. Nicotine's a powerful drug. So how are you going to bring about small rather than large changes? To come into them and saying, people who smoke 3 packs of cigarettes a day have this lifespan. How old are you? Let's say the lifespan is to age 65 and you're 45. Based on statistics, you have 20 years left to life. Do you want to live longer? If you drop 1 pack a day, you add 10 years of life. You're now from 65 to 75. I don't know if those are the right numbers. I'm just saying them. Your lifespan has just been increased, if you're 40, by 30 to 35 years. If you go down another pack of cigarettes to 1 pack a day, this is the lifespan. If you eliminate not smoking the whole pack, but half a pack, you start breaking that down in little small increments. People go like, you know what? I could stop smoking 1 pack a day. I'll continue smoking 2. Or I smoke 2, I'll smoke just 1 pack a day. Or I smoke 1 pack a day, I'm going to cut it back to a half a pack a day. That's more likely. It might take longer to get that, but you can change people's attitudes by bringing about small rather than large changes in their lives. People are more likely to change their behavior if the suggested change will benefit them more than it will cost them. Well, you can certainly do that with smoking. Your lifespan expands. Not only that, but the money you save, you can use in other ways. So you can do that. There are things that can be done. It's not easy, but you can show them that there's a greater benefit by cutting it out. People are more likely to change their behavior if the suggested change will meet their needs. If you cut smoking, life is important. Let me ask you, if you had a choice and you met with a doctor and he said, you have one of 2 choices. You can live 1 more year of life or you can live 40 more years of life. Which will you choose? I would choose the 40. Why would you choose the 40? Because I want to live. That meets a need. How do you meet that need? You got to start changing your smoking behaviors. People are more likely to change their behavior if the suggested change is approached gradually in their speech. If it's approached gradually in their speech, they're more likely are going to change. If you get right up front and say, all of you who smoked 3 packs of cigarettes, you need to hear this right now. You need to stop. Well, that's not happening. You need to approach people gradually. We are creatures of habit. And some of our habits are not good habits. And those habits just don't change because we know them. They're like a friend of ours. They control us. So what do we do to change the attitudes? You need to gradually, in your speech, create the possibility of change. Does that mean it's going to happen? Not immediately. Change is hard to bring about in people. The older we get, the more difficult it is to make those changes. Not impossible, but far more difficult and challenging to make the changes. So you have these 2 speeches coming. We have talked now about the 2 speeches of the formative speech, which is due 1 week today, the persuasive speech, which is due then on the 28th of the month of next month, which is 4 weeks today. And so go back over these and say, okay, these are important things to think about. The structure of the speech will be similar. The intent of the speech is radically different. So I have now completed that discussion. And what I want to do is, just give me a second here, is to minimize this. And I want to go on to the last topic, and that's the issue of language. I want to talk about this next and the importance of words. Remember, we talked about the issue of, let me just see here if this works. I'm just going to double check something here in a moment. Just waiting for it to, there we are. And now I'm just going to go up here and I'm going to, no, I didn't mean for you to do that. I'm going to just double check here and make sure that you can. Okay, just making sure. Can you see language? Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, we do.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to talk. This is one of the last topics that really I talk about. Now, I will on the 21st, we'll be doing a normal class where I'll bring some material, but we'll be doing a couple of different things in that class. So in a sense, this is my last major lecture that I'm doing for this course. Then after that, I've got the PowerPoint that we're going to look at, and then that will be kind of the end. Okay, so I want to talk about language. You remember I talked about the three parts of a speech. There is the tone of voice, body language, and words. Those three make up the speech. And I said to you that body language is about 50% of a speech, and that tone of voice and your language, not your language, but your tone of voice, your pitch, your rate, your pauses, your volume, your enunciation, fluency, and vocal variety make up about 40% of the speech. So that's about 90%, and that the words make up about 10%. I also pointed out that the words were the most important. You remember the diamond ring? The diamond itself on a ring is the smallest part of everything. You have the shape and you have what it's made out of. And all that, the gold, the circle of the ring and the setting, all is meant to help everybody look at the diamond part. Well, the diamond part of a speech happens to be language. So while it's 10%, quite frankly, to me, it's the most important that needs to be looked at. So let's look at language here. What is language? And again, I do remind you, you all have these PowerPoints that you can look at, go over again. So don't get rid of those PowerPoints, because when you're giving speeches, go back and remember this important stuff. What is language? Okay. Just trying to get my computer here. They are. Language is the tool used to communicate meaning. It is the tool used to communicate meaning. When we are giving a speech, you don't just get up there and make sounds out of your mouth. You don't just wave and make all sorts of gestures. You use words. And it is words people are listening to. Now they're listening with their eyes to your tone of voice, your body language, and their ears also to your tone of voice. But it is the language, that the tool ultimately that communicates meaning to you. And your brain is so powerful. It's such an incredible computer. You come into this world with no language, and within a year of living, you have a certain number of words. You've learned to say mommy or daddy or mama or papa or whatever terms you use to address your parents. You learn to say in your language, if it's not English, words that say no, yes, those sort of words you begin to learn to say, okay, and to be able to utilize. Um, so language is so critical and such an important part, and we use it without thinking about it, but we need to stop and give thought to it. It's the tool we use to communicate meaning. A few moments ago, I simply asked you, can you see my PowerPoint? And I waited, I asked again, and somebody said yes, or one or two people said yes. We just communicated. I asked using words, can you see my PowerPoint? Yes. Okay. That means good communication took place. I asked a question using words. Your mind went, he is asking, can I see this PowerPoint? The answer is yes. And you gave the answer, yes, I can. Yes, we can. That made me feel good because it meant we're on board with this one. That means we communicated. That means all things being equal, you're looking at precisely what I am looking at on my computer. Normally, we'd be sitting in a classroom and I wouldn't say to you, can you see my PowerPoint? Because I can see it on the screen. I don't need to ask that, but I needed to ask it here to ensure that you and I are on the same page. We're on the same literal PowerPoint page together. Language is a tool used to communicate meaning. Language is a system of signs and symbols used by a speech community, family, work, church, small group, to share meaning and experience. And we all have a language that we use, and not just our mother tongue language, but even the way we use certain words or etc. They have meaning in our work situation or in our family situation, our church situation, our small group, our friend with our friends. Certain words have meaning or additional meaning to it. That's important. And so we learn to use those words. For instance, this was a kind of a phrase that we had in our family, game night. Now, often on Friday nights, when our girls were younger, sometimes we'd have a game night. We would play table game together. Great idea, because while you're playing games, you're communicating. You hear about what their day is like, what their school experience is like, and you are having fun. You have some laughter and all that's competition and all those sorts of good things. Well, it was a game night, and that's what that meant in my family. Now, it's quite obvious. I'm talking about games, and it was on a night. It was a Friday night. We did that sort of thing, and so we had a language using words that we all knew that meant something. It happens and certainly in family, as I said, it happens in work. Certain words do mean something. And I worked years ago, prior to getting any degrees, at a carpet company, and I knew what it meant. Carpet number 14 red. I knew where to go over to that, pull that down with a big machine, lift and pull it out, bring it down, bring it to the ground. We'd roll it out, and we'd cut the piece that we needed. That what was left would go back up to that location. And we had this little short language, and we knew exactly what we were to do. Okay. So in my work situation, it was that there are so many phrases used in the small. I'm part of a small group. We meet on Sundays right now, and we can ask questions like, okay, let's let's analyze, let's look at what is your perspective about those words. All meant some, or all do mean something to us. So whatever words that you use, whatever phrases, what's critical is that language is used, which is signs and symbols, and immediately it goes into the mind of the person and we understand what each other is saying. Now, we've talked about these two areas before. I want to go over this because it's important to communication. Encoding, it's putting meaning to words, the symbols. So words are used, and when we're an infant, words are used, and eventually we start to frame that word meaning this. Like daddy meant that man, mommy means that woman, and that's in my brain. So if somebody says, "Where's daddy?" I can look over at my dad when I was a kid, or my mommy, or my mother, or my father, whatever terms are used, and those symbols are there. And are you hungry? The word hungry means, do you have that sense in your stomach like it's empty and it needs food? And I can say yes. I can shake my head yes. And they become helpful for communicating. If you have a tummy ache and the baby's crying or the child's crying and you're trying to understand what's wrong, and they say tummy ache, then you know that something's wrong inside their tummy. They're not feeling well. And the meaning comes out, and the image of that meaning comes up. I have a sick child. So encoding is the issue of putting meaning to words into the mind. It's putting meaning to words, and then we put it in our mind so that word gets used. We know what is being meant. As I'm speaking, if your English is really strong, all my words are sentences, and you're understanding what I'm saying because you're pulling those words out, frames a sentence, and you understand. Not only understand the meaning to words and the symbols, but also the way it's said. For instance, when I'm talking like this, it's a sentence. But what if I ask a question? Just listen. Do you understand? It's a different cadence versus just talking like I am now. And you suddenly realize I'm looking for a response by the tone along with the words and the symbols that create meaning and images of meaning. Now, decoding is interpreting the meaning to words. So as you're listening, you have these words in your brain. Decoding is listening, putting the words together, those words that are symbols, they're used by another person in order that I will have understanding of what they are saying. So decoding, you're speaking, and I'm listening, and I'm decoding and understanding. And if I don't quite understand, I might say, I think I hear you asking me this. Is that correct? And you say, yes. Then I can answer. So the encoding is putting the words in our brains and putting meaning to those words. Decoding is interpreting the meaning of those words that are in my brain as I hear somebody using them, and then having that understanding of what's being said. So encoding in, decoding out. One-way communication. We've already gone through this. The sender has a message, uses language, words, through a channel to the receiver. So if I were to say to you, and I'm not, what are you doing this afternoon after class is over? Immediately, you understand what I'm asking you. What are your plans for the rest of the day? I've used words, asking a question through this channel of Zoom, being together in class. You're the receiver. You received that message. Now, that was asking you a question, but what if I were to simply say, I am just informing you that 1 week today, your informative speech is due. I'm the sender, the professor. I have a message. Your speech is due next week. I'm using words. The channel is Zoom. You're the receiver. You're the student. Oh, yes, the speech is due next week. Transactional communication, two-way communication. Again, I've already gone through this with you, but I'm reviewing this with you because it has so much to do with the importance of words themselves. Okay, a sender. Can you see my PowerPoint? I was sending a message, and my message was using words, language. Can you see my PowerPoint? I'm using the channel of Zoom. You listened to me, and I asked it again. I just need somebody to help me. Can you see my PowerPoints? I used words again, the same channel. You're the receiver of the message. You're hearing your professor say, can you see my PowerPoint? Someone in the room, or a couple of you, became the sender. Yes, 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 we can. We can see it. Your message was yes, yes, we can. Through Zoom, back to me. I was the sender, now I'm the receiver. And I said after, thank you. It's so good to know you can see it. Everything works fine, and that's great. And this is an environment that we have. Our environment is educational. Our environment, to some extent, is one-way communication right now because I'm doing the speaking. But the educational environment is what's happening here. And you're encoding. You've encoded, words, and now you're decoding those words as I'm speaking. When I asked you, can you see my PowerPoint? You know what each of those words mean. Can I see the PowerPoints or the PowerPoint? You're decoding it. And I asked it as a question. Can you see my PowerPoint? You decoded what I'm asking. I'm asking a question. I need somebody to confirm. And you say, yes, we can. That you decoded the message and you've responded. And when you sent me the message, yes, we can, I am decoding your message. Oh, good. Confirmation. Everybody can see it. Good communication is happening here. Whoops. And there's always noise involved in fact, in one-way and two-way communication. There's environment, there's encoding and decoding taking place. There's noise that takes place. There's psychological noise, and there's physiological noise. Some of you got up a little earlier. Some of you are thinking about the fact that you don't have to meet with me next week, next 2 weeks at all. Oh, that's going to be nice. You can sleep in, or you get to do something else. And how you're going to use your time to your business. But right now you might be thinking about that. Well, that's noise in the midst of this. Well, there's all sorts of noise that takes place here. In regard to words, we need to understand the denotative and the connotative meaning of words. And maybe in your mother language, it's words have one meaning more than can have multiple meanings. But in North America, in English, words can have more than one meaning, and there are other cultures where words can have more than one meaning. Denotative is the explicit meaning of a word. This is what the word actually means. Black actually means a color, dark, a dark color. White is a light, bright color. And they can have a very clear meaning of a word. If I use certain colors, that color comes to your mind. However, we can have connotative, a secondary meaning to its literal meaning. For instance, years and years ago, I'll use a word, and this is not to be derogatory, but to make a point. Back in the 1970s, the word gay meant happy, to be happy. Oh, I feel so gay today. That was the denotative explicit meaning of a word, of the word gay. But it took on another meaning, a connotative, a secondary meaning to its literal meaning. It became a word used for homosexuality. So the word is seldom used in its denotative way today. It's mostly used in the connotative meaning, which is really its secondary actual meaning. And it's important to be aware of words because we use words. Remember, words are powerful, and words are like the diamond ring of a speech. It's what stands out. Using the right words, understanding what we're saying is important. Okay, just give me a second here while Don't know why that did that. Now it doesn't want. Okay. Now there are problems that we have with language. There are problems that we have with language that we always need to be aware of. For instance, abstraction. General concepts or specific details. Abstraction is a problem in, for instance, the sky, the air you breathe. What is sky? What is air you breathe? You can look outside today. I see beautiful blue sky, but that's really more than just, that's where we know the sky is, but can you really see the sky? You can see the color that comes out because of the sun, etc. Can you see the air? Well, the air is part of that sky, obviously. You can't see the sky, or you can't see the air. You can smell the air. You can feel the air, whether it's calm or blowing hard. It's an abstraction. We know it exists, but how in the world can we help people know it exists when it's an abstract? If I say to you, and you don't know the word air, where's the air? I don't know. Well, the air is in all around us. It's within us, necessary for the sake of breathing and living. You don't know these things directly. You can touch, hear, smell, or taste these things, depending on what abstraction you're talking about. Yet we create words to describe them because we need to, because they exist, even if it's an abstract. Love. What is love? It's a good question. Can you see love? You can see the expression of love, the demonstration of love, but can you see love? Yet it's an abstraction, yet it's an emotional, a human emotional experience that we need to put a word so we have meaning to it. So we have abstraction, then we also have another problem with language, and that's the issue of definition. It's boundaries of some named things that we create categories. Animal. If I said to you, today I went for a ride in the car and I saw an animal, you'd say, well, that's nice. What do you mean animal? What type of animal are you talking about? I'm talking about a horse. The animal now has more definition. It's a horse. But wait a minute. There are all types of horses. What type of horse? It was a quarter horse. That's a working horse. That's a horse that really can run fast, cut corners quickly. Cowboys used to use it to make the cattle come home. It's a quarter horse. It gives you far more definition. I can even give more definition. There was a quarter horse who was black. So if I'm looking for a quarter horse, it has to be black with some white on it, maybe, or something. We keep giving more definition, and then it becomes clearer to us. So we need to just be aware of the need for definition. The fear of women. Okay, I know who a woman is. I'm married to one. What is fear? That needs to be defined. And then fear of women is being disregarded, being raped. Okay, the definition becomes clear what we're talking about. Problem, we assume others share the same definition. Not always. When we use words with definition, they can mean different things to people. So the more concise we get, the better it becomes in regard to understanding. But definition helps that process. Animal, okay, I got it. It's an animal. A horse, okay, now that helps. A quarter horse, that really makes it even much more clear. A horse with some white, a quarter horse, that gives it even more definition. We also have a problem with the issue of polarization. Polarization. Thinking of the world in two values of opposites are polarization. Left, right, black, white are opposites. Well, my computer's decided to give me a moment of frustration. I have no idea why it did that. Okay. Um, hot and cold, they're opposites. Okay. But is there something in between? Well, yes, there is. There are levels or stages between opposites. Not all issues of life is a matter of extremes. For instance, you have hot and cold, but you could have hot, warm, which is not hot but not cold, tepid, which is in between warm and cool, and then cold. So you have stages. So polarization can become a problem. It was a cold day outside. Okay, here's another problem. And that is, what is cold to you may be warm to me. Like today, right now, I opened the window because this room got warm. Right now, it's quite cool in here, and I'd like to go up and shut the window again, but I won't because the room is cooled down. So to me, right now, the room is feeling cold. But this is not cold compared to people who live in the North Pole with snow all the time. It's much colder there. I might have a hot day here, and it gets hot here, but it's not as hot as probably some of the real countries near the equator, where it gets even hotter. And so we need to understand that we need to keep redefining words or giving clear definition to words, because we could say it was a hot day and you're telling a story in your speech, but what does hot mean compared to you as you see hot in somebody else? An example, you are either for or against abortion. Okay, polarization means yes or no. Can there be something in between? Some people will argue no, there cannot be. Others would argue yes, of course. And Joanne and I knew a couple, actually about 40, 50 couples all met together every week on Sundays. And one couple in our group had a child who's about 3 years old or 4, and she got pregnant again. And then the doctors, something wasn't right, and the doctors did some tests and said, you have cancer. And the only way to save your life is if we do chemotherapy and radiation. But we can save your life. This can be done. However, if we use chemotherapy and radiation, it will kill the unborn child, the fetus. And they had to make a decision. Oh, that was a problem. And they decided against chemotherapy and radiation. And the baby was born, and born healthy. And the mother died about a month after the baby was born because of the cancer. And so it was a very sad, sad story that took place. And so we struggled. Who do we save, the mother or the child? Of course, the parents had to make that decision. Very painful. Allness is another challenge that we have. E.g., women includes every woman, living or dead, in the world, but not boys, girls, or men, and nothing else. Allness, to be all-inclusive. Okay, I don't know why my computer wants to act up here. There can be problems with allness. We create generalities that at times misrepresents reality. Okay, here's a misrepresentation. All professors are weird. Really? All professors are weird? I wouldn't be surprised. There are professors who are weird, but probably not all professors are weird. But all creates allness, meaning all. Therefore, when we talk about someone or all men are this way, we mean all men, but that may not be true, or all women, that may not be true. And so allness can be a problem when we use it. My daughters used allness when they said to us, when they lived with us, you always say we have to be in by a certain time. No, we don't always say that. We certainly say it on school nights, and like a Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, and Thursday night. Yes, absolutely, we do say that. But there are other nights we're not saying the same thing. So it's not always that way. So we need to be very careful about the usage of allness. Um, language shapes attitudes. Language shapes attitudes. When we name somebody something, it shapes an attitude. Your name probably comes from uh, a unique approach your parents had, or from naming you after another relative or your parents or whatever. It has meaning, and it's important. And how we talk to people, how we label people, is very, very critical. Name calling is a tool used by bullies to hurt a person. People who say you are stupid is a very unkind thing to say. It was not allowed in our home, because name calling can be very, very painful. And so we have to be careful, because it shapes attitudes. There was a cartoon I saw of a man who um, was a cowboy, and his horse went lame and he needed another horse. And he came upon a man who had two horses, and he said, I'm running, I just robbed the bank and I'm running away, and I need your fastest horse. And he had a gun. He says, which, he said, I want the fastest horse. What are the names of your horse? And the man who had his two horses said, oh, this horse here is Lightning. And this horse over here is called Lazy. Well, the man took Lightning. Unfortunately, Lightning wasn't a fast moving horse. Lazy was. The name implied something, and the man got it wrong as to what the word would mean. We have to be careful in regard to words that we use about each other. They can be very unkind and create an attitude. Credibility. Language shapes attitudes about your credibility. As you're speaking, your audience is assessing you, and they assess credibility to you. When you come across caring, relating, but you use words that stretch the mind, it raises your credibility, and your audience is more likely going to listen to you. So be aware of the words that you use, because they say something about you. Your status. Language shapes attitudes. Status. In regard to public speaking, and this is true, the status that has the most credibility, right or wrong, is the word doctor. If you are a doctor of medicine, you're a doctor of philosophy, you're a doctor of education. I'm a doctor of education. If you're a doctor of something, audiences give you more credibility, and hopefully you live up to that credibility. So status becomes very, very powerful, and language establishes that. There can be other words that give status. Father, mother, give status to you. Engineer, programmer, scientist, etc. It gives status, and status is something that you want in public speaking, because it gives you credibility, so that your audience more likely will listen to you. A language shapes attitudes regarding in the area of sexism and racism. To say unkind things of the opposite gender does not help you. It creates a problem. To speak of other people of other races in a derogatory way shapes attitudes. And so to say things about people from a different country, a different color of skin, you shape attitudes. And attitudes can be negative and they can be positive. You can shape them positively or negatively. So language really does shape attitudes. Therefore, naming, credibility, status, sexism, and racism are all critical categories in that realm and understanding. Gender language and language. There are differences in communication between genders, and we just need to appreciate that there are differences between them. Females first. Here are some uh, important things to understand about females. So when you're speaking to females, you need to have some grasp of their uh, communication language. Um, okay, I'm just going to get these down, and I think that I had 6 of them. There we are. Here are what females spend more time talking about: personal and domestic subjects, relationship problems, family, health, and reproductive matters, weight, food, and clothing, men and other women, gossip about close friends. Those are the categories that women tend to spend more time talking about. Not only these things, but these are the cluster that they feel very strongly about. And in light of that, you need to be aware of these sorts of realities. It's again a bit about audience analysis. So when you're going to speak somewhere, will there be all men or all women or about 50% of each? What will it be? Because then it helps you understand that in your presentation, you need to be thinking about your audience, and women are part of your audience. And so understanding these orientations of what they talk about more than others simply helps you. If you're giving a speech and you want to talk about relationships, and you talk about it within the realm of family and the power and the beauty of it, women are very, very much connected to that. So you're using language that they understand. So men spend more time talking about music, current events, why this computer is deciding to act up, I'm not sure here. Really? Come on, computer. Men talk about music, current events, sports, business, other men, gossip about sports figures and media personalities. And by the way, I was reading once in an article that men gossip more than women do. They just don't call it gossip, but it is. And often it's gossiping about other men in the work situation, often in a negative way. So music, current events, sports, business, other men, gossip about sports figures and media personalities are very much where a lot of men go in their communication. And so we just need to be aware that when you've got men in the audience, you need to be using a language that they also understand, which means using words that are important to them. You cannot, if it's all women, it's one thing. If it's all men, it's another thing. But if it's a mixture, then you need to create both femininity and masculinity in your language at different times. That becomes really, really important. I had to, I guess I had to speak at a, in fact, I've done it more than once, a women's conference. And I would illustrate with femininity. Not that I am, because I'm not, but I would use that from being a mother to being a working mother to any number of things. And women just connected because I was using their language. I spoke at a men's weekend in Oregon, and I made up. I asked the guy. His name is Henry, who had me come down and speak. I asked what were the key things that were important to men in that particular culture, like where they lived in Oregon. He said, well, certainly family is really important, etc. But outside of that, in the spiritual realm, what was important to men were two key things: hunting and sports, and more importantly, the Seattle Seahawks football team. And so I used the theme of football in my talks, and I actually got myself a T-shirt. I actually have it in the room next door here, and I used it, and I had the Seahawk emblem on it. I got this T-shirt quite cheap, and then I went and got somebody to print the name Congo, my last name, and the number on it. And the number 12 for the 12th man. And if you know sports, you would understand what that means. And we had a great time. And I was using their language and connecting. Now, I've also done talks with men and women. I try to keep it somewhat even in regard to the illustrations and the words that I use to talk their language. Females and males were equal in talking about the following with the same gender. Okay. Personal appearance, sex, dating, etc., related to the opposite gender. Those were the three things that males and females were equal in talking about with the same genders. Okay, so in other words, men talked to men about personal appearance, women talked about women with personal appearance, both talked about sex with their own gender, and both talked about dating or related to etc., related to the opposite gender. Those were things that they spoke. So if you're dealing with couples or you're dealing with young adults who are not married, understand what they're talking about with their friends of the same gender. All that impacts the words that you choose to use when speaking. Here's a cross-cultural reality between females and males, and this is kind of the end of this this talk here. Females use language more for connection and intimacy. Males use language more for status and independence. That doesn't mean that it can't go the opposite to some degree, but females are much more focused on connection and intimacy. And I shall never forget that video that I was watching. This sociologist who was well known in her day, and she did a video, and I actually had the video. Don't have it now. I don't even know where it would be. And it showed the differences when females walked into a room that was empty with just a camera and were each carrying a chair and told just to sit down in the chair and have a conversation. And they had it at different stages: young girls, older girls, teenage girls, older teenage girls, young women, middle-aged women, that sort of thing. They were told to walk into a room, take their chair. There's a camera there. Nobody else was in the room. Camera would be going, nobody be in the room, and talk. Then they did the same thing of men, different stages of men going in. Young boys together, each walking in with their chair. Older boys, teenage boys, older boys, young men, older men. And all they had to do is walk into the room, carry their chair, put the chair down, and sit and have a conversation. So when the women did this, the women put their chairs so they were facing each other, or just a slight angle, but so they could look at each other in the eyes and have a conversation. Why? Because their communication, the words that they were using, were for the purpose of connecting and closeness with another female who's a friend. And they would just have a conversation. They would totally forget about the camera. They were so involved in conversation. When the males came in to the same room, they did not put their chairs this way. They put their chairs facing the same direction. And then when they wanted to look at each other, they'd look at each other just for a few moments and then look away and look straight ahead talking. They were careful about eye contact. They were more interested in really how they were seen by the other person status and their sense of independence looking straight ahead, where females look at each other for dependency, for connection, for intimacy. And so when you're talking about the usage of words, think about your audience. Males, females, a mixture. What does that mean regarding the words that you use? Words are critical to be used in the area of public speaking, and you need to be aware of audience analysis of the words that you use because they mean something. I have one last thing to do. I'm just going to kick out of here. Whoops, I should have put that on. Therefore, they tend to speak a different dialect, or as some say, a different genderlect. Words are significant, males and females. Okay, sorry about that. Now I'm trying to get my, for some reason, my computer here wants to act up here. I have no idea why. I'm just waiting for it to stop this. Come on. Okay. Now, there we are. And I'm just going to, do that. And I am going to go back to screen, save, and I'm going to put on, I'm not sure. Can you see that or not? Oh, no, you cannot. Don't worry, I'll make that so you can see it. Just give me a second here. Hopefully, okay, screen, here we are. Can you see this now?
Yes.
It says speech it's the evaluation form. Everybody can see it, right?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. That's two-way communication. All I need to do is to walk through this with you right now, and we're done for the day. And I just want to go over one more thing that I said before. I want to just go over it again with you. So let me go over this with you. This is the speech evaluation form that I will be using. I sent it to you, so you should have it. I sent it to you for a few reasons. One, so you can look at it and understand that you put your speech together, what is important, because we've gone through all this stuff. Secondly, you know what will be coming to you will be evaluation form, and I'm going to talk through this in a moment. And then also, when you do your final exam and you're given a speech, my suggestion is you take this form, make it a hard copy or a couple hard copies of it. And as you're watching the speech, it's about a 7 or 8, 9 minute speech that you'll have, and you can watch it more than once. And then you can start circling certain letters as how you saw the speaker do in each one of these, and know why you wrote that. Just make sure you jot some little thoughts here. Then you have to write that 1,000 to 1,200 word essay. But then this becomes the form you can use to guide you and give you the ability to write and write well, and to write good observations. So I just wanted to go through this with you. So next week you're giving your next speech, and then I'm going to evaluate, and this is what you're going to get back. You're going to get the sheet of paper, not lots of writing. I'll write a few things on the sides here on occasion. I might write like over here, good job over here. You need to work on, and you'll see that here, or whatever I write. So you have your name written, my initials here, and then this is all the theory we've been going through. This is the introduction. Remember, I talked about that. I'm going to listen. Did you gain my attention? Did you actually use a strategy? How strong was the strategy? Was it excellent, good, average, fair, or weak? If it's weak, basically I'm saying it was almost non-existent. So I'll be watching. How well did you gain my attention? How well later did you hold my attention in the introduction? Relating the topic to the audience, remember, the audience is asking you the question. So what's your gig? What is this about? You're writing here, it's so how are you relating this to me or to the audience? Okay, and that's important. You need to be able to demonstrate this is important. You can't just say, oh, this is important to you. That's not really relating it. It does a little bit, but not enough. You need to help the audience say that listening to the speech on not smoking is important to all of us, because when we're educated at what the damages that smoking does to our lungs and how it decreases our lifespan, it will help you appreciate that all of us need to make an evaluation. Boy, I've just related it to the audience when I talked to a room full of smokers. Relating the topic to myself, establishing the right to speak. You have to be able to talk about, you don't have to have been a former smoker, but you need to be a person who maybe has studied the impact. I've read this research. I've considered, I have relatives that have died from it. And I determined that smoking is dangerous, and I've chosen not to be a smoker. But I have studied it. And that's important to explain what you mean by study it. The purpose of the statement or the thesis, what is the speech about? The purpose of the speech is to further inform you about the significant dangers to smoking and how it shortens your life per each pack of cigarettes that you smoke in a day. Something of that nature, whatever it is. It's a purpose statement. People hear that and say, this is on smoking, the dangers of smoking, etc. They get that. The quality of forecasting the organization of the speech, then what this does is it's basically making sure the audience knows that you have organization. So for you to say here, in light of that, there are three major thoughts or two major thoughts that we're going to look at. First, the impact of smoking, and secondly, the means by which we can reduce or eliminate smoking. If that's the two main points, I have no idea. But then the audience knows where you're going. So this introduction is a very important area here in the speech for you to do. Okay, and then we get down to the body of the speech. Okay, this is the speech, the bulk of the speech. This is the intro. Here's the conclusion. But this is the body of the speech, the organization. Was I able to follow you? Could I follow and understand where you were going based on what you said up here? Transitional statements. When you finished talking about the dangers of smoking, now you want to talk about the way to quit smoking. You need to help your audience understand. Now that we've considered looking at the dangers of smoking, let's secondly and lastly look at ways we can reduce or eliminate smoking. Immediately, I know you've changed direction for the second point in your speech, of your body of your speech. Supportive materials for main points were clear and helpful. What sort of research did you use to support that? And then down here, quality of research demonstrated in the speech. So you kind of get marked. These two are interconnected together. This is showing for each of the supporting parts of each of these. What reading have you done that demonstrates? Dr. Gordon Gilkey said that every time a person smokes a cigarette, they eliminate these many seconds from their lives. Okay, and here's the study was done in Good Health Journal. Okay, you don't need to, everything you say, you don't need to have a supportive material, but you do need to demonstrate that you've done some research there because it gives you credibility. Here's credibility, the ethos of the speaker. Were you competent? Did you have the right to speak? Now I want to show something here. And were you trustworthy? These two here, okay, did I really see you as trustworthy? These two here connect with up here, number 3, relating the topic to the speaker. You establishing the right to speak needs to help you on competence. If you don't do anything there, your competency is suspicious. If you do stuff up here that's strong, establishing the right to speak on the topic, competence and trustworthiness goes straight up. These two are connected to up here. Similarity and orientation. This is connected to number 2 in the introduction, related to the topic. Similarity, you're connecting your topic to your audience. You're relating the topic to your audience. I see, and it's not just what you say up here, but did you carry through with what you said up here? Was it clear that that was the case the whole time? Attraction. Attraction does not mean you're a pretty woman or you're a handsome man. Attraction has to do with how you presented yourself, how well dressed, how well groomed, and how confident you came across in presenting yourself? Did you come across um, in an attractive way that made me focus on the rest of the speech? Were you sincere? Did you mean what you were saying? How did I perceive you as a speaker? How sincere, your sincerity, how did that come across? Dynamism has to do with that energy, that passion, the usage of words, and the clear direction that you're going. How dynamic were you in this? Again, the letters stand for excellent, good, average, fair, and weak. And all I do is I circle these, and then sometimes I make comments on the side. I might do a comment here and say, good job relating it back to here. Or I might say, this, you needed to strengthen this up here. So there are different little comments I make. So in the next speech, you know how to improve. But mostly watch the circles because that tells you what to do in improving. Paralanguage issues of the speaker. Okay, remember, we talked about the issue of the nonverbals. We talked about the issue of its power that interrelates with these areas right here. Your pitch, we went through that. That's the highs and lows of your voice. If you talk like this the whole time, then clearly you do not understand that pitch is important and you are not using pitch. And so this speech gets very boring. You don't want that. As I listen to you, I want to be able to see that you pitch, high, low movement of the voice. Your rate, how fast are you speaking? This is an informative speech. It should be moving at approximately 100, 125 or so words a minute-ish. Please don't try to count your words after to see if you were doing it. Okay, in the persuasive speech, the informative speech is 125 to 140 words a minute. Persuasive is about 140 to 200 words a minute. You speak faster there. Pauses. Were the pauses meaningful, necessary, prolonged, just right, effective? To what degree? Volume. Yes, I can turn up my sound, but I've even had some people talk so slow that when I had it turned up really loud, I could still hardly hear them. You need to project your voice. But if I say speak a greater projection, I'm talking about take in more air into your lungs and speak from your lungs, not your throat. And speak in such a way that people are able to listen to what you're saying. Enunciation, it's saying the words with clarity. How well do you pronounce the words? Fluency, it's the capacity to be able to say words without unnecessary sounds that come out like or it's also relates to the rate. If there are pauses that are prolonged, it influences fluency. Vocal variety is different than pitch. Pitch is the high and lows. Vocal variety captures the emotion. So if you're surprised, whoa. If you're sad, oh. If you're happy, I'm happy. Okay, whatever. Though vocal varieties help us capture the emotion of the moment of your speech. If you're happy in a sad speech, I might be wondering, what in the world are you doing? So be aware of that. So there's the paralanguage. Then there's the bodily aspects of the delivery of the speech. Your gestures. Remember, I told you, get back from the podium. I'm sitting up close because I work the mouse. But back when you're here, you have your camera up somewhere. When I did a speech in this room, I think I mentioned to you, I had a ironing board up here with a little kind of like podium. It wasn't a real podium. It was just some stuff up to hold my notes up. And I had the camera back here. And it allowed for a good opportunity to see minimally the waist up, if not the whole person, and see gestures, to see the head movement, to see the hands and the arms, to even see some movement of the body can be beneficial. I'm watching for those gestures that brings about a sense of the emotion to go, oh, that says something's wrong, something hurts. To go, yes, creates a different gesture. Eye contact, yes, there's the exact camera perfectly, but I'm not just looking at the camera, I'm looking at my PowerPoint at the same time. But you need to be able to, when you give them the speech, you can have some teddy bears or some dolls or something, or even people sitting in the room, so you can kind of look at the teddy bears or objects. Even if you don't have that, if you've got glasses, or put up some tumblers, or if you don't, draw some figures of people, stick figures, and tack them on the wall or something, so you look at them, so it gives you eye contact. Because don't do this when you give your presentation. Some people do this. They get up really close to the camera and they look like this. Or what they do is, after they've looked like this, then they look down like this and they stay down here the whole time. No eye contact. Be aware. Facial expressions. Your face says something. Smiling, concern, anger. Let your emotion be shown by your facial expressions. The overall movement deals with the capacity of using yourself, your physical being, but connected with your message. How well is your speech moving? Is there nice tempo to the speech? Is it definitely moving with a clear direction? And is your body involved in that presentation? Then there's the conclusion. Okay, here's the beginning, here's the speech content, and here is the conclusion. And there are 4 functions of conclusion. A brake light. Remember, people need to know you've entered the conclusion. And you can say it in a very uncreative way by saying in conclusion. Fine. Better that than nothing that lets people know you're in the conclusion. Let people you're in the conclusion. You can simply say, now that I have shared these 3 thoughts with you, let me conclude with reminding you, and that's instant replay, the 2 major thoughts. Let's say you're talking about the color blue and green, the 2 major colors critical to our well-being, blue and green. All you did was you quick instant replay, told the people, or reminded them what you spoke about. Here's that response desired. This is both involved with the informative speech. This is a little bit of the persuasive. And on the persuasive speech, you definitely want to hammer this point home. What you're calling your audience to. Don't just say, well, I hope you like the speech. That's not doing that. You need to expand what you're saying there, okay? So what's your response you're looking for? And then the upbeat ending. In light of the colors that we have considered, blue and green, I trust that you will seriously consider at different times wearing these colors, because they really do bring a very happy attitude when you are, if that were true. I'm not saying it is. Okay, I just want to check one little thing here before I go on. Okay, that didn't do anything. Good. Anyways, that really kind of brings to a close today. Now, I just wanted to go back to some reminders with you. And that is, again, reminding you, we don't meet next week because your next speech is due. We don't meet the week following because that's reading break. We do meet on the 21st. I'll remind you, but you do need to remember, we're meeting then. It's a normal class time. On the 28th, we don't meet because it's your persuasive speech. This is speech month. And then on December 5, it's final exam time, and you'll be in front of your computer with your email. And about 8:30, I'll start sending out the exams when you get it. And I'll be giving you instructions, and there'll be instructions on the email to do that. So we'll be going there as we go along. Now, I just need to do one more little thing here. Just give me a second here. Here we are.